You know what's been bugging me?
Mm. What's that?
It's this thing I keep hearing from folks back in Taiwan
Okay.
about, like, why some people just seem so chill.
Chill.
Yeah, like nothing's going on, even with all the stuff happening with China.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
It's kind of head-scratching, right? Especially when you think about, like, talking about how nobody in the U.S. even knew about Taiwan.
Right. Like, seriously, how can people not know? Hey, everybody, and welcome back to Sip&Talk. Seriously, how can people not know?
And then you've got all those pro-China comments popping up online, which, let's be honest, rub a lot of people the wrong way.
Yeah, no kidding. It's a really interesting point you bring up, though, this tension between Taiwan's, very real geopolitical situation and just how aware or concerned everyone actually is.
Totally. It makes you wonder, it's not doing enough to be seen, like, hey, world, we're here. Or are some people just hoping for the best and not really thinking about the less than best possibilities?
And then on the flip side, right, this Taiwanese dude living in America, pretty sure it's Asian boy online.
Yeah, I've seen his stuff.
And he's blowing up, and people love it.
It's awesome. Makes you think, is that part of the answer? Especially when things get a bit, complicated.
Exactly. And that's right where all the stuff you sent me for this deep dive really comes in, that we're looking at how Taiwan is building its presence globally, how it's navigating all the pressure from China, and then this big question of safety and crisis awareness within Taiwan itself. Plus, we've got those comparisons to how the U.S., Japan, and South Korea see and prepare for potential crises.
Okay, so we've got articles about Taiwan trying to get noticed internationally. Say, hey, look at us. And then there's the stuff about how Taiwan is actually dealing with the whole China situation, like the military stuff, the international relations, the alliances we're building, plus those pieces about how aware people in Taiwan are about the risks and how we compare to the U.S., Japan, and South Korea on the whole meter.
Right. Exactly.
Now, so with all this info, where do we even begin?
Well, maybe the most logical place to start is with how Taiwan is actually projecting itself onto the world stage.
Okay, spill the tea, besides, being the kings and queens of bubble tea.
Good one. Well, probably the most significant aspect is Taiwan's role in the global semiconductor industry.
The chips.
Exactly. The articles really highlight that TSMC alone produces over half of the world's most advanced chips.
Wow.
And this isn't just about economics. It has huge implications for global stability. Countries like the U.S. and Japan rely on these chips for everything from defense systems to, their iPhones.
It's true. I can't live without my phone.
Right. And that leads to, increased interest in Taiwan. You see a lot of investment coming in, like the huge increase in U.S. investment in early 2025.
So basically, Taiwan is kind of indispensable on the world stage.
In a lot of ways, yeah. You could almost say it creates a silicon shield, makes other countries think twice before doing anything drastic that could disrupt that supply chain. But it's not just about the hard power of technology, right? Taiwan's also making moves in soft power, too.
Okay, what's that all about?
Think about individuals like probably Asian boy online using social media to show off Taiwanese culture.
Right. He's great.
It's about putting a face to Taiwan, connecting with people on a personal level.
It's way more engaging than some boring news report.
Right. And it's not just individuals. Taiwanese films and music got a lot of international recognition in 2024.
True.
These things really help build a positive global image.
Yeah, it's like a new kind of diplomacy, building those person-to-person connections.
Exactly. And then beyond that, you have what's called non-official diplomacy.
Non-official. Sounds kind of sneaky.
Well, it's about how Taiwan interacts with the world, even with the whole one China policy limiting the number of countries that officially recognize it.
Right.
So things like trade delegations, cultural exchange programs, strong trade relationships, they're all part of it. And, the U.S. actually supported Taiwan's participation in some UN-related activities in 2025. That was a big win.
To be part of the conversation, even without a formal invitation.
Exactly.
Sounds like a good start. But now, for the big question, China. How are we dealing with that?
Right. Well, it's a multi-pronged approach.
Okay, break it down.
On the military side, Taiwan has been steadily increasing its defense budget. It was over 3% of GDP in 2025.
I remember when they announced the longer conscription period. It was a big deal back home.
It was a clear sign they're taking things seriously. This allows for investments in modernizing the armed forces, buying advanced weapons like F-16s and missile systems.
Oh, yeah, and those deals with the U.S. always make headlines, and probably annoy China quite a bit.
Uh-huh. You could say that. But beyond military stuff, there's also a focus on building international alliances.
Makes sense. Safety in numbers.
Exactly. Stronger relationships with the U.S., Japan, Australia, that's key. And things like the IPEF, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, and those joint military exercises with the U.S. in early 2025, they're all part of that. But Taiwan's been working on diversifying its economic relationships. The new southbound policy is a big part of that. It's all about building stronger ties with Southeast Asia and India. And we actually saw a 15% growth in exports to Asian countries in 2024. So it's starting to show results.
So less reliance on China, more friends in the region, a stronger military. Sounds like a solid plan. But what about the people in Taiwan? Are they feeling the threat?
It's interesting, the sources paint a bit of a mixed picture. Awareness definitely varies across generations.
Oh, how so?
Well, the younger generation, those in their 20s and 30s, they seem to be the most aware. Polls show over 70% see China as a major threat, and they're generally in favor of stronger defense, even independence.
That makes sense. They've grown up in a different world than their parents and grandparents.
Exactly. Now, for older generations, the views are a bit more mixed. It's influenced by their experiences, their economic ties to China, But even then, the constant military activity from China, like those PLA aircraft flying into Taiwan's air defense zone, that's definitely raised awareness.
It's hard to ignore when something like that is happening all the time.
Right. And there are tangible signs of growing awareness, both from the government and regular people. The Wannan air raid drills, for example, they were expanded in 2025, and tons of people participated.
I saw people talking about it online.
Exactly. And there's been a lot more discussion online about emergency preparedness, stockpiling supplies, evacuation procedures, especially after what happened in Ukraine.
Oh, yeah, I remember that. It made things feel a lot more real for a lot of people.
Absolutely. But the sources also point out some areas where we could be doing better. One survey showed that only 30% of people in Taiwan actually have an emergency kit ready. So awareness is one thing, but being prepared is another.
It's like, we know we should probably exercise more, but actually doing it is a different story.
Exactly. And some businesses, especially those that rely heavily on China, they might be underestimating the risks.
If your livelihood depends on peace, it's hard to imagine the opposite.
It's true.
Now, this term national subjugation, that sounds intense. What's the actual risk of that happening?
Well, it's a very serious concern, but it really depends on a lot of different factors. The biggest one is the military imbalance, right? China spends way more on defense than Taiwan.
It's like David and Goliath.
Yeah, but with the possibility of a powerful friend coming to David's aid, the U.S.-Taiwan Relations Act doesn't specifically guarantee U.S. intervention, but the strategic ambiguity policy, which the Biden administration reaffirmed in 2025, leaves that option open. It's a deterrent.
Okay, so it's not certain either way. What about the rest of the world? We talked about Ellie's experience of feeling like nobody in the U.S. even knew Taiwan.
Yeah, and that feeling is understandable. The One China policy really limits Taiwan's international recognition. But even without that formal recognition, Taiwan has made a name for itself, the tech industry, the democracy that gets attention. It might not always be on the news, but it's there. And this whole idea of China being a safe place, that also fuels that desire for a separate identity. Many Taiwanese value their democratic freedoms. They see the human rights issues in China, and they just don't buy it, especially with China being increasingly assertive.
Right. It's like, come on, are we really supposed to believe that? It just pushes people further away.
Exactly. And this is where individuals like RAY, who we think is Rayajin Boy, come in. They're using social media to show the real Taiwan to the world. That video he did with Kai Cenat, for example, it got millions of views. That's huge for getting people to understand Taiwan better.
It's true. Seeing someone make bubble tea or explore a night market is way more engaging than any political speech.
Exactly. It's about building those human connections.
Okay, so this has been super interesting. But why does all this matter to our listeners? Why should anyone outside Taiwan care?
Well, what happens in Taiwan can affect the whole world. The stability of the Taiwan Strait is crucial for global economics and security. And Taiwan is a major trading partner for a lot of countries, including the U.S. So its economic stability matters globally. And the U.S. State Department has been more vocal about supporting Taiwan's participation in international organizations, which shows how important Taiwan is becoming on the world stage.
So we're all connected. Okay, let's talk about how Taiwan's sense of crisis awareness stacks up against other countries.
All right, let's compare it to the U.S., Japan, and South Korea. I just want to give another shout out to Mickey from Mickey to Life. His channel is a treasure trove of inspiration, and he's a huge Sip&Talk fan.
Absolutely. Make sure to check him out and maybe even share your awesome podcast intro with him once you've created it. Right.
The sources provide a pretty fascinating analysis here.
Okay, I'm curious.
Let's start with the U.S. Their main focus is global, right? They're worried about China, Russia, maintaining their influence around the world. And while they have experienced things like Pearl Harbor and 9/11, they're geographically isolated, so the threat to their homeland feels less immediate. So while there's concern about the Taiwan Strait, it's not necessarily seen as an immediate crisis for the average person.
So Taiwan is a piece of the puzzle, but not the whole puzzle.
Right. Now, for Japan, they're in a much riskier position, being so close to China, North Korea, and Russia. They've also got their own history with World War II and the North Korean threat. They're definitely aware of the potential dangers in the region. Their defense budget is going up, they're working more closely with the U.S., and they're taking part in exercises related to the Taiwan Strait. And public awareness about China is rising. But they also have this strong alliance with the U.S., which gives them a sense of security.
So they're worried, but they also know they have a strong friend.
Right. Now, South Korea, they're dealing with the constant threat from North Korea, right?
Yeah.
They have a very direct and real sense of crisis because of that. They have a strong military, and they work closely with the U.S. and Japan. But when it comes to the Taiwan Strait, there's a bit of a divide. Some people are worried about the potential impact, but others are more focused on North Korea.
North Korea is like a constant alarm bell for them.
Exactly. And finally, back to Taiwan. We see that in the increasing defense budget, the longer conscription, and the public's support for resistance. There's also a lot of effort going into preparedness, like those air raid drills. Compared to the other countries, Taiwan's sense of crisis is the most immediate and intense.
Because the threat feels so real and present.
Exactly. So to sum it up, the U.S. is thinking global strategy, Japan is watching its region closely, South Korea is focused on North Korea, and Taiwan is looking right across the strait at a very real danger.
It's a really complex picture.
It is. In terms of intensity, Taiwan's sense of crisis is the strongest, then South Korea, then Japan, and finally the U.S.
Yeah.
And in terms of action, the U.S. and Japan are relying on alliances and military power, South Korea's focus on self-defense, and Taiwan is doing a bit of everything with a lot of public involvement.
It's been a lot to take in, but it's important to understand all these different perspectives.
Absolutely. So to wrap things up, we've seen how Taiwan is trying to be seen on the world stage, how it's dealing with the very real pressure from China, and how its people are responding to that pressure. And while there are differences in how aware people are, there's a real sense of resilience in Taiwan. And as we've explored, all of this is happening within a complex global context where each country has its own way of seeing and responding to potential crises.
Hopefully our listeners now have a better understanding of how Taiwan is handling these challenges and how its safety and global role are seen both inside and outside the country.
And to leave you with something to think about, given all these different levels of awareness and how interconnected our world is, what does it really mean to prepare for danger in times of peace in the 21st century? And how important is it for us to understand each other and work together to keep the world safe and stable? And that's a wrap on this episode of Sip and Talk.